everyone. So, as the White House just recently reported that coronavirus could actually kill in between 100,000 to 240,000 Americans, as the Trump administration has extended the quarantine mitigation measures all the way up to late April, and as Trump has changed his rhetoric from just saying that the coronavirus is really not a big deal to saying, yeah, the coronavirus is actually pretty vicious, and as he just said to Americans that they should brace for a very painful next 2 weeks, and as the Wall Street Journal just recently reported that the death counts in Italy are actually a lot higher than what is being reported, as all of these things have been happening, the right-wing, anti-Democrat party strata is telling us that we need to go back to work. While all these things are happening, before there was a study saying that up to 2 million Americans could be killed from coronavirus. Now they're saying from 100,000 to 240,000 Americans can actually be killed by this coronavirus. And this is with self-distancing, this is with self-quarantining, all of that. Still, up to 240,000 Americans could actually get killed from coronavirus. The right wing are telling us we got to go back to work. The people who have dedicated their lives to just going to war with the Democrat Party, because that's the only thing that we got to worry about, that and Muslims and immigrants and migrants who are coming here to lay tile for a living. These people want us to go back to work because in their eyes, our entire purpose for existing is the economy. The almighty market. The market is God, okay? When the US dollar says, in God we trust, it really means in the market we trust. Because, you know, when the founding fathers came up with the dollar, what they really meant to say was the market because, you know, the actual word God, it's actually a Germanic word, but if you look at the root of it, it actually literally means to create. So what's the entire purpose of living? It's to make money, right? It's to create profit, to get that GDP up. So that's really what it means by in God we trust. So to these people, our entire purpose for living on this planet, for living on Earth, is to make sure that that GDP stays high. It's to be slaves to corporations, to big industries, to the politicians who get tax dollars. To them, that's our entire purpose for living. So you're looking at the epitome of fascism, which is the domination of corporations over humanity. That's why fascist regimes in the past had work camps. And the people who were running the work camps, the entities that were running the work camps, were big corporations like IG Farben and like Mitsubishi in the case for Japan. Fascism is about the domination of the corporations, of the industries over the rights of human beings. So you're looking at it right here. So let's get right into this. Matt Walsh, guy who writes for The Blaze, which is a publication that is ran by good old Glenn Beck. He says 35,000 human beings are killed in car accidents every year in this country. We have all decided that that's a price worth paying. If our cars are worth that kind of cost, what is our entire economy and way of life worth? Well, I love how, I've noticed this way of argumentation has become so popular for those in the right wing because they are just desperately wanting to make Trump look good, and they want to politicize this entire situation, which is very funny because, well, it's not funny because people are actually dying in this situation. But what is ironic, I should say, is that right-wingers they just love to talk about how Democrats politicize everything. Stop blaming this on the president. Stop blaming this on Trump. It's not Trump's fault. Trump did everything he could. Trump's doing it right. Trump's for real, to quote Alex Jones. Trump's for real. But yet they also politicize everything. Democrats politicize things, of course. I'm not denying that. No one's denying that. But conservatives, right-wingers, righties, as I like to call them, they politicize everything. When they say stop politicizing things, all that means is don't blame Trump, don't blame the Republican Party, blame the Democrats. So they're all politicizing the situation. There is an entire atmosphere of politicization taking place over the whole situation, just as it happens in every catastrophe like this. And they love to use this argument of, to belittle the whole situation, they love to use this argument of, well, you have a better chance of dying in a car crash. You got a better chance of dying of heart disease. You got a better chance of, jaywalking and getting hit by a car. Well, that's true. You do have a better chance of dying of these things. That's very true. But here's the question, or questions, that I have for you. Over 100 police officers are killed in the line of duty every year in this country. Not all of those deaths are by shooting. Sometimes they are killed in car accidents. But nonetheless, all of these deaths are in the line of duty. So every year, over 100 cops die in the line of duty as police officers. Do you ever tell a police officer, don't worry, officer, you got a better chance of dying in a car crash than you do getting shot by a criminal. So don't bring a gun when you're on duty? Don't have a walkie-talkie when you're on duty so you can call for backup? No, none of that is necessary. Because, you got a better chance of getting hit by a car than you do getting shot by some gangster. None of these people would ever tell a police officer that. None of them. Because it would be completely absurd. Because even though, yes, as a police officer, you do have a better chance of being killed in a car accident than being shot, you still take proper measures to keep yourself safe. Now, here's another question, another argument that I have. Conservatives love to talk about how great Israel is. And I'm not saying that, Matt Walsh is a Zionist. I'm just speaking in generalities here. In general, conservatives are extremely pro-Israel. And they love to talk about how Palestinians launch rockets into Israel. Thousands upon thousands of rockets have been launched into Israel. Do you know how many Israeli citizens have been killed by rockets? Like, what's the rate of Israeli citizens killed by rockets? From 2004 to 2014, 27 Israeli citizens were killed by these rockets. Now, that's 27 too many. I'm not belittling the deaths of these people. But why don't these righties apply the same logic to the situation in Israel that they are applying to the coronavirus? You'll never hear a righty say, don't worry, Israel. Only 27 Israelis have died in 10 years from rocket fire from the West Bank. Don't worry about it. It's being just exaggerated, The whole Israeli-Palestinian thing, the threat of Palestinian terrorism, it's been exaggerated. It's being just blown off proportion. It's been blown out of proportion. It's being hyped. It's being politicized, None of them ever use this argument. Because that would mean, they're actually belittling the Israeli situation. That means that there's actually room for sympathy for the Palestinian cause. They can't make this type of argumentation because it would be destructive to their own agenda. But they don't apply this logic to Israel. They only apply this type of logic when it is advantageous for them. Why? Because they are doing what they accuse the Democrats of doing. They are politicizing the whole situation. Here's another example here. This is from Matthew Dowd. And Matthew Dowd was a strategist for the Bush-Cheney campaign. He was close to the Bush administration. He's part of the whole Republican strata. And he says here, I believe President Trump is right about at least one thing today, We must find a balance between protecting citizens' health and protecting our economy. Corporate interest. Decimating our economy in pursuit of fighting the virus doesn't do our citizens any good in the short or long term. So let's just have people go back to work so that they can get infected more, and we can fill up the hospitals to the point that we have completely exhausted their capacities. And in that sort of situation, you'll have more people dead because more people will not be able to have access to medical care and hospital attention, and they'll be left out to dry. They'll be left out to die, actually, I should say. And this is actually the biggest fear of this particular pandemic. It's not that, 50% of Americans are going to be killed, or, 45 or 30 or 75% of Americans are going to die. Like, no one's making that argument. The biggest fear, or one of the biggest fears, is that this is going to exhaust America's hospital capacity to the point that hospitals are going to be filled, that our medical infrastructure will be completely devastated, and you'll actually have more people dead because you'll have more people without access to hospitals. And this is actually getting a lot worse in certain regions of the United States, and things are looking actually quite dire for people in America's rural areas where tens of millions of people live, not just from coronavirus, but from other ailments as well, because people are leaving the rural areas, and that means less money for the hospitals in these regions, and that means hospitals are actually closing down. And lots of hospitals have closed down in these past 15 years in the rural areas. But this is a different point. But nonetheless, it does tie in with the whole situation of America's medical infrastructure, and how if you just allow life to go back to normal, at least partially, you'll have more people infected. And this could, it will fill up America's hospitals to the point where you'll have more and more people without access to hospital or medical attention. So this whole idea of, it'll be actually worse if we tell people to quarantine, this whole idea is rubbish. The Wall Street Journal, as I said, came up with an article today saying that the death numbers in Italy are actually a lot higher because a lot of people in Italy have not been able to have access to proper and adequate hospital care, which means people are dying without hospital care. They're just dying. And this has been seen a lot in elderly care centers in Italy, where, for example, one coronavirus infection will lead to almost an entire elderly care center wiped out. Like, these things have actually been happening in Italy. It's pretty tragic. But these are people who aren't in the hospitals. So here's a video of Mr. Glenn Beck, good old Mormon conservative, talking about how people in their 50s need to go back to work.
I sincerely hope that we are not at a place as Americans to where we are going to let the Democrats jam down the Green New Deal because we're at home panicked. I want to have a frank conversation with you and ask you where you stand. I'm in the danger zone. I'm right at the edge. I'm 56. In Italy, they're saying if you're sick and you're 60, don't even come in. So I'm in the danger zone. I would rather have my children stay home and all of us who are over 50 go in and keep this economy going and working. Even if we all get sick, I'd rather die than kill the country, because it's not the economy that's dying, it's the country. And I'll show you just what's happening to us just by looking.
So, in other words, Glenn Beck and those like him, they actually want to kill the middle-aged and the elderly to keep the economy going. It's to save America. This is a cult of personality. The Japanese had it when, in the Japanese imperial religion, it was, you die for the emperor. Die for the emperor. Die for emperor. In this context, it's die for Republican Party. Die for Donald Trump. Die to fight the Democrats. Get coronavirus and die. This is something that comes right out of Malthusianism. You know, the whole philosophy of, well, we should allow a large portion of the population to die in order to balance out the number of food between, in order to have a balanced amount of food for the population, like allow a whole bunch of people to die. It's like something straight out of Malthusianism. And it's quite ironic because this is coming from Glenn Beck. This is a guy who for years has been talking about fascism, has been talking about, the fascist tendencies of progressives and all that stuff. But yet he right now is demonstrating fascist sentiment, a fascist paradigm right here in this video by saying what matters is getting that GDP up. What matters is the corporations getting their money and their labor. That's what this is. That's all that matters to these people. Kill the elderly. Kill those who are middle-aged. Doesn't matter if they get coronavirus. Doesn't really matter. And, when people are eventually going to go back to work, it's not going to be Glenn Beck who's going to be working in retail, who's going to be working behind the register, who's going to be working in car mechanics and all that stuff, who's going to be working in factories and in industry. It's going to be the average person that's going to suffer. And I don't work in a factory. I don't work in retail. I'm a talker like Glenn Beck. But I'm not so foolish as to say something like, well, yeah, send all the 50-year-olds to die. And this goes right in line with the 4chan meme of killing the boomers. And here is Glenn Beck just saying he is promoting an idea that goes right in line with the kill the boomer mentality. This is the underlying creed or the underlying statement of these right-wingers. Kill the boomers. Even if you are a boomer that's saying these things, they want to kill the boomers. Here's some more of this insanity. Just shy of 3 million people die every year. Here we go with the numbers game. That's 8,000 per day. That sucks. I wish we were all immortal and no one ever died. But we can't shut down the country's economy to keep people from getting sick because ultimately that leads to more death than we prevent. So sending people... This is another right-winger, by the way. So sending people right into the factories, regardless of the fact that they could get coronavirus... That is your solution. See, and this has been my problem with this whole mentality of, well, it's not even a big deal. It's just like the flu. This is just some big conspiracy. Is there a conspiracy behind this? It's very possible. I'm not going to discount it. It would be foolish of me to discount it because we all know that governments don't allow crises just to go by themselves. They take advantage of a crisis. This is very Machiavellian, and politicians do read Machiavelli. But at the same time, we have a virus crisis. So it's like, what are you going to do? Just allow people to go to work? You're just going to allow people to live life like it's normal, like usual? You can't do that. This is a difficult predicament that we are in as a society. Do we do the self-quarantining? Do we do the self-distancing and all that stuff? Or do we just live life as usual? I mean, how do you think the Black Plague in the 1300s spread so fast? Because people didn't know how to handle a virus. People didn't have the scientific knowledge of how viruses work. They did not have the scientific knowledge of virology in those days. They had no idea what they were dealing with. They didn't understand viruses. They didn't understand the microscopic world. I mean, microscopes weren't invented yet. People didn't understand these things. And so they went living life as usual, and it spread like crazy. And millions upon millions of people died in the Black Plague. In just 2 years, entire monasteries in Europe were wiped out. Thousands upon thousands of priests and nuns and monks were killed. Millions died. Now we have a better understanding of how these viruses work, so we can actually implement more proper measures such as self-quarantining. And even in the case of self-quarantining, you can still have hundreds of thousands die. This is why the White House just recently said that this virus can kill from 100,000 people to 240,000 people, and that's why Trump has changed his rhetoric, saying, hey, this is actually a vicious virus, and that's why the Trump administration has extended the mitigation measures to late April 30th to be exact. And Donald Trump changed his rhetoric for a number of reasons. One, it was because of the information that was presented to him as to how dangerous this coronavirus is. And secondly, he was actually presented with a poll showing that over 50% of Americans actually prefer to have the quarantine measures implemented because they don't want to get coronavirus. Why do you think they have general worker strikes taking place all throughout Italy, North Italy and South Italy? Because workers don't want to go to work and get coronavirus. They're saying, hey, the factory working conditions, the safety conditions of the job area that they're working in, they're not even clean enough. People are getting sick while at work. In an Amazon plant in France, there was a guy who got coronavirus, and his coworkers said that the work conditions in the Amazon warehouse, the conditions are not clean enough. They're not even providing the workers with hand sanitizer. And so they went on a strike. Now, these strikes could lead to something more radical in the sense that you could have a socialist uprising, you could have a surge in vicious nationalism. That's all true. But the fact is that these people didn't just wake up in the morning and say, hey, I really don't want to go to work. They have a reason why they're going on strike. They have a reason. Because they don't want to get coronavirus. Workers in Italy are saying the same thing. They don't want to get coronavirus. Workers here in the US have been saying the same thing. They're terrified of getting coronavirus. But what do these blowhards in the right-wing strata say? Go to work, guys. Because, you got a better chance of being killed in a car crash. Here's another one. If given the choice between dying and plunging the country I love into a Great Depression, I'd happily die. Well, go right ahead, Mr. Kelly. And go right ahead, Mr. Beck. Sacrifice yourselves for the great Republican Party. At least you'll be consistent with your rhetoric. But what does this tell us overall? What does this tell us about these right-wingers? What it tells us is that they don't give a damn about you. They don't give a damn about you. You listen to their shows, you read their articles, you read their books, you look at their material, you give them their financial foundation. But nonetheless, they don't give a damn about you. They're saying, go to work, die, and then they're saying, well, I'll die. Yeah, I'm waiting to see one of these guys in a hospital bed. But you're really looking at the epitome of a fascistic mentality. Regardless of the fact of how they say the left is fascist, progressives, you're looking at a fascistic mentality in which the corporation, the GDP, industry is number one over human life. And that is the underlying dangerous ideology that connects all these people with this type of mentality. Anyway, I've talked enough. Hope you guys have enjoyed this message. Hope you guys have learned something from this message. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.